The area of grass and water, called the moor, separates this side of Knutsford from the smart shops and restaurants in King Street. This side has long been called CrossTown, though no one is sure how this name came about. Perhaps it was simply because it is across the moor. Perhaps it is because there was once a large stone cross by the road to Mobberley. And why is the church called St. Cross? There was no person called St. Cross. It refers to the wooden cross on which Jesus was put to death by the Romans. Perhaps it should be called Holy Cross Church, but it isn't. In this presentation, we will show you a little of how CrossTown developed over 400 years, and how the people of this community and its church have always been deeply interconnected. Let us therefore roll back the years to the time of the English Civil War, when Cromwell's Roundheads were fighting King Charles I's Cavaliers. The map of CrossTown shows only a few cottages along the Mobberley Road near the Builders Arms pub. The gentry, shopkeepers, lawyers, doctors, and skilled craftsmen lived in the growing town of Nether Knutsford across the moor. They provided goods and services to the surrounding large estates: Tatton, Tabley, Toft, Norbury Booths, and Peever. In contrast, most of the people in CrossTown were blacksmiths, weavers, humble tenant farmers, or labourers on the Norbury Booths estate of the wealthy Lee family. In centuries past, Christianity was woven into everyone's life, and almost everyone went to church. Knutsford was in the parish of St Mary, Rosstherne, and Knutsford people had to walk to church 4 miles there and 4 miles back on a Sunday. During the week, local people attended a small church near Longridge, dedicated to St Helena of the Holy Cross. All that remains today are a few gravestones laid nearby. This was also the ancient burial ground for Knutsford, and probably hundreds of people are laid to rest here. One of the oldest remaining stones marks Peter Antrobus, who died at the beginning of the Civil War. Nearby, we see James Johnson, an ironmonger who lived through that war and died aged 35 in 1679. St Helena was mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine. She was a devout Christian and travelled to the Holy Land in search of the true cross of Jesus. She did find a wooden cross and took it back to Constantinople. The name Helena or Helena is still with us. So what happened to St Helena's church? In 1741, 100 years after the Civil War, Rosstherne parish was split up, creating the new parish of Knutsford. It needed its own parish church, so St John the Baptist's was built in the centre of Nether Knutsford. The new authorities declared Helena's church redundant and removed its liturgical vessels, its cross, its records of births, marriages and deaths, and even its bells to St John's. St Helena's was abandoned and stripped for building materials. The people of CrossTown were much offended by this haughty behaviour. They felt that they had been robbed of their heritage. In protest, they refused to attend the new church, and the us and them feeling between the two sides of the moor hardened. This went on for generations. Eventually, Mr. Peter Pennington Lee, the Victorian landowner of Booth's Hall, supported his tenant farmers and workers by pressing for CrossTown to become its own independent parish with its own church and vicar. He drew up plans for a new church building and provided the land and materials on condition that the local people built it with their own hands. It was completed in 1858. Here, some boys are playing a form of cricket on the Barncroft field behind the church. The first vicar was Lawrence Riley, who was also master of the local grammar school. An old farmhouse next to the new church was converted to his vicarage, and the stable to a schoolroom and dormitory for the boys. Though the new church had been built with love and conviction, it had not been well designed. Either the foundations were too weak or the roof too heavy, because alarming cracks soon appeared in the walls. The second Victorian vicar, Reverend Ralph Bradbury, was driven to distraction by trying to keep the place together. Sadly, the only sensible solution was to demolish this hand-built church and have a new one professionally designed. This map of 1874 shows how CrossTown has developed. Note the tannery. It would have smelled awful. The railway had come to Knutsford in 1862. Many well-to-do business people moved out from Manchester to country mansions which they built in the fields behind CrossTown. They enthusiastically raised money for a new church, and the distinguished architects Paley and Austin were engaged. Their design shows a spire, but it was never built. Here, some Victorian bricklayers are working on the new church in about 1881. At about the same time, a day school for boys and girls was built across the road from the church, paid for by the congregation. The church tower was added in 1887 to mark Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. Here is the finished church in 1890. St Cross Church is a Grade II star listed building. The same photographer took this picture in 1890 when standing near the Builders' Arms. Note the houses and small businesses at the top of Hollow Lane. The local men who cut reeds on the moor also posed for a photograph. The reeds were used to thatch local cottages and woven into baskets and sold at Gidman's shop in King Street. The reed cutters probably took a drink at the Builders' Arms, which looked quite different in those days. By 1892, Ralph Bradbury's health was very poor. He had to resign as vicar and wrote a touching letter to his congregation, explaining that he felt heartbroken at leaving so many warm-hearted, generous friends. One of his friends, a church warden, was the wealthy Charles John Galloway, director of the Manchester firm of Galloways, which owned a prosperous iron foundry and boiler-making factory. He built a country mansion for his family in CrossTown, near the site of the old tannery. He named it Thorneyholme, but the locals nicknamed it the Boiler House. The drive up to it is still well known. His son Percy died tragically in India, so Charles Galloway commissioned the famous artist Edward Burne-Jones to design the stained glass west window as a memorial. The window was made by Morris and Company, leaders in the arts and crafts movement. When Charles's wife Annie sadly died in 1899, he had Morris and Company design another church window to commemorate her. During the Second World War, Thorneyholme House was used to station American troops. At the end of the war, the soldiers vandalised the place for souvenirs. When the owner, Mrs. Lowe, returned to view her old home, she was so shocked that she turned on her heels and left immediately and sold the estate to the council. A few years later, the council demolished Thorneyholme to make space for social housing. Only the east and west gatehouse lodges and a garden wall remain. In 1893, Reverend Ralph Radbury was succeeded as vicar by William Armour, who served for 43 years. We can see how much the church was central to community life from the strong all-male choir in 1907. The congregation, which was most of the CrossTown community, raised yet more money to install a larger organ and to extend the school because the population had grown. There had been plans for a full peal of bells, but instead the money was spent on the school. That is why St. Cross Church has only one bell. CrossTown remained a separate village until 1894, when it was incorporated with Nether Knutsford into the Knutsford of today. However, CrossTown maintained an independent spirit by having its own May Queen and May Day parade and its own silver band. Madge Hammond was the May Queen in 1919. Here we see the bunting out along Moberly Road, with a crowd in front of the Builders' Arms. After the Great War of 1914-18, a war memorial to local servicemen was erected at the corner of Thorneyholme Drive, with Reverend Armour leading the dedication ceremony. Here is the CrossTown School football team in 1927. They won 8 league games out of 8 played. Pupils attended this school building until 1966. The next long-serving vicar was Eric Thomas, who came to St. Cross in 1939, just 6 weeks before the outbreak of the Second World War. The vicarage and adjacent parish room were used to billet troops training to parachute in Tatton Park. After the war, Mrs. Thomas started the Young Wives Group in an effort to get normal life going again. Her initiatives were continued by the Lee family, who came in 1952 when Reverend Richard Lee was made vicar. One of the sons, Peter, was a keen amateur photographer, and he snapped many aspects of CrossTown life, such as the choir in 1959. Church services drew large congregations. All the women are wearing hats, the done thing at the time. Many of the local people worked and socialised together, making their own entertainment. The church room, part of the original farm buildings, was regularly used for brownies and guides, scouts, Christmas parties, whist drives, vegetable shows, jumble sales, pantomimes and plays. Here is Murder at the Vicarage. The annual garden party was a major social occasion. Here, Lord and Lady Merriman are supporting the fundraising. He was a senior judge. On Remembrance Day, Moberly Road was closed during the service at the War Memorial. The Scouts, Guides and the CrossTown Band all took part. From the church tower in about 1960, Peter Lee snapped perhaps the last steam train chugging towards Manchester. In the distance, you can see the old gasworks and the laundry in Drury Lane. Looking down Moberly Road, the Victorian water tower is there, but only a few of today's houses. Before the flats were built in Ella Grove, there was a dairy on the corner and a bicycle repair shed. And here is another photograph of the top of Hollow Lane. A few other old photographs show places in CrossTown that now look very different. This spot is hardly recognisable as the road junction of Brook Street with Hollow Lane, where the traffic lights are now. The cottage on the corner and the Congregational Church are both long gone. For many years, the grocer's and convenience store was Thompson's, opposite the Lee Arms. It later became CrossTown Post Office. Yet another long-gone building is Booth's Corn Mill at the edge of the parish, where the Longridge trading estate is now. Near to Thorneyholme stood another grand mansion, which has since been demolished. Woodlands was built in 1850 for Henry Long, a local entrepreneur. In 1927, it was taken over as a private boarding school for boys called Knutsford College, Woodside, under headmaster Mr. Percy Hope. Over 1,300 boys were taught at Woodside before it closed in 1954, soon after Mr. Hope died. St. Vincent's School and the houses on Manor Park South are built on its grounds. Rockford Lodge and Sharston House were two other fine mansions built for the wealthy professionals who moved into Victorian CrossTown. Peter Lee also photographed the changeover from the old vicarage to a new one built in 1956. The old one had long been unfit to live in. Being an ancient farmhouse, it had stone floors, and in winter there was ice on them. The old parish rooms were demolished along with the old vicarage soon after the new one was completed. The school then doubled as the parish community room until a new one was built in the 1980s, immediately next to the church. The parish room continues in regular use by the congregation and local organisations. One of Reverend Richard Lee's regular duties was to take services at Sharston House, which by that time was a nursing home for retired clergy and their wives. This photo was taken in about 1972. Christenings, weddings and funerals have marked the cycle of life at St. Cross. The churchyard has for generations been the final resting place of many local people. Here, for instance, is the headstone to the Caldwell family, who had run a well-known plant nursery along the Chelford Road since the time of the French Revolution. Their customers included Peter Pennington Lee, Esquire, of Booth's Hall, and Lord Egerton of Tatton. When the business closed in 1992, the land, like Thorneyholme, Woodlands and Rockford Lodge, was sold for housing. Indeed, much of the story of CrossTown in the post-war years has been the development of housing, with some light industry at Parkgate and Longridge. The Longridge housing estate was built in the late 1960s, near to St Helena's Church, sponsored by Manchester City Council, and many of its residents came from Manchester. The growing population needed shops, a doctor's and schools. Manor Park Junior School was formed in 1993 by joining CrossTown Infants with Norbury Booth Junior School. The small St John's Wood School at Longridge is now for students with special needs. During these many changes, the church kept up a strong choir into the 1980s. Here they are in 1978. In the 1990s, the T-Mobile company contracted with St Cross Church to install mobile phone aerials on the tower roof, the highest point in Knutsford. Today, if you are a Knutsford customer of EE or 3, your mobile and broadband coverage probably comes from St Cross. In recent times, St Cross has had 2 lady vicars. Jane Shepherd had been a hospital chaplain before coming to Knutsford in 2011. She was also a governor of Manor Park School and took classes there. In Jane's time, the church hosted several popular Christmas tree festivals. Many Knutsford businesses, clubs and groups created a decorated tree, some witty, some just beautiful. Jane moved on in 2015, and now our vicar is Paul Deakin, here with his wife Angela. From the church tower, they can see the whole of CrossTown, out to where yet more new housing has been planned for the edge of the parish. The 235 houses of Parkgate Village were built in the early 2020s. Planning permission has also been sought for over 200 houses on the rewilded fields just beyond Longridge, near Boothsmere. This has been controversial, with many local people objecting on grounds of access and loss of environment. In January 2024, Cheshire East Council refused planning permission, though it might yet go to appeal. Led by Paul and his team, the congregation at St Cross maintains a lively Christian faith, an inclusive family atmosphere and engagement in the CrossTown community. In addition to the thoughtful, regular weekly services, Paul conducts baptisms, weddings and funerals, emotional, personal celebrations in which we support each other. The Christingle services, sponsoring the Children's Society, are particularly popular. Paul is chaplain to the Mayor of Knutsford and so leads civic services for Knutsford Town Council. Recently, the church hall has become home to the food bank run by the Hope Central charity, giving support to local families struggling with the cost of living. Hope Central also regularly use the hall to run Debt and Money Centre, Fresh Start and similar courses to help people get back on their feet. The St Cross congregation support many other charities, both by raising awareness and by donating thousands of pounds over the years. Some examples are toy collections at Christmas and sponsoring the Cheshire Without Abuse charity, birth certificates for street children in Guatemala, and toilets for villagers in Central Africa. Here is clothing for Ukraine, donated by St Cross in wholehearted support of a Rotary Club initiative. As this presentation has illustrated, heritage is both what we have inherited from the past and what we ourselves pass on to our children and grandchildren. Despite a reduced regular congregation, St Cross Church continues as a hub of stability and community in an ever-changing world. It extends a welcome to the ever-growing population of CrossTown, which now is almost 7,000 people.